Welcome to An Aries and Pisces Walk Into a Coffee Shop, the podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Bridget, she, her.
And I'm Tiffany, she, her. This is a podcast where two friends let go of perfectionism and talk unedited.
P.S. Can we just keep rolling and this could be our podcast episode for this week?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because I've never felt just more proud of us and delighted to be sharing in this experience.
It's
with
good
you.
spellcasting.
It is good spellcast. Oh my God. So, yeah, we're doing, we're doing a really good job.
We sure are.
We're doing a great job. Look at us.
Look, can I brag for a second?
You absolutely may brag anytime.
I've been a human in the world, like outside of the apartment, for so many days in a row.
Huh?
It's mystifying.
Okay, but this feels extremely big considering that you have not been feeling well. And yeah.
That thing happened where past me was so optimistic and excited about things that were happening in the future. And then she just kept on saying, yes, we're all going to die soon. You should do stuff. And then all the things fell on the same weekend. And then current me was like, what were you thinking? How are you going to do this? You're going to have to cancel on everybody. But I didn't. I showed up anyway, all in a tizzy, sometimes a little late, sometimes pretty early. Just, chaos. And I had a nice time.
That is great. I'm very proud of you. Do you remember how I said I was going to burp earlier? It was just there it happened. Okay. We're good. We're good now.
Oh, release.
I don't know. There might be another one stuck in there. But yeah, I am I'm all for this. Showing up and showing ourselves how capable we are, even when we don't think that we are. I'm curious for you if in doing this practice of still continuing to go out and do the things even when you're not feeling necessarily particularly up for it, but you're like, I still want to go out and have a good time and see what happens, and then you're finding that oh my God, I am able to still go out and have a fun time even when I am also having this hard time and I didn't think that I could. Okay, so for me, I'm wondering that does it this is going to sound extreme. Does it feel, now that you have this data, on the other side of it of yes, I can do this, I can still go out, have a good time, does it feel less like you're gonna die going into another situation where you feel like maybe you're feeling a lot of anxiety or dread or whatever it is something in yourself able to feel less like death? I guess I could explain it with an example, but
no, you're doing a really good job. I'm just kind of sifting because I want to give a really honest answer, because my initial thought, which I think is great, is yes. The answer is yes. It does feel less like death. And then I was like, oh, that's interesting that that's the first thing that you wanted to say, because it is still hard at the same time. But I think that now so that still happens where I get very anxious and I'm like, what have you done? And sometimes I'll worry about it 4 days where I'm like, what have you done? So yeah, that feels like dying. But I'm finding the then actual doing of it easier. So I still feel like dying throughout, but I don't think it spikes as high. So the
Mm-hmm.
highs are as high and the hurdles feel lower. So it's, I think, all starting to even out towards some middling thing. Still a death process, but just, I think, more, the timeline is shorter. It's not as taxing. The
Mm-hmm.
recovery is easier after I do make myself do the thing. And I think it's because I keep on building on that database.
Mm-hmm.
And my hope is that one day, more consistently, it'll be this middling where maybe I'll have a spike of, oh no. And then maybe like in the same day, I could like calm down and then do the thing without having to sweat through a shirt or three before I go. Just
Progress.
small, achievable,
I think it's
physiological
good.
goals.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's great. I think that I wouldn't have known how to even ask this question or like what I was even talking about had it not been that experience that I had the other week with going to the party
Mm.
that I think I told you about
Yeah,
on
you
your
did.
own. But I think that it was like that felt really eye-opening for me because like leading up to this party, right, I was realizing I had a ton of anxiety and like dread.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wait a second, Bridget, like, why are we feeling these things? Like, what's underneath of them, right? Because
Yeah.
in theory, like, I was going to see somebody that I really, really love. And so then, like, I got to that bit of like feeling like, oh, I was going to feel like socially awkward or like I wasn't going
Mm-hmm.
to have anything to say. I wasn't going to know anybody. But then I was like, oh, well, what if you actually meet somebody and have like the best conversation of your life? Or what if you go and you feel really fucking awkward and you just realize that you can handle it
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to be okay and then you're going to end up leaving the party and then going back to whatever you were doing that day. And like I think that like realization made me feel so much more grounded in like capable
Yes.
of like, oh, I, I could feel some discomfort and I know that I'm going to be okay. And then that's when I
Mm-hmm.
realized that, oh, prior to this realization, I felt like if I felt discomfort, like I was just going to die. It like felt like death. It felt that
Mm-hmm.
big. And I was like, that's so extreme.
Yes.
And I didn't know that it could be another way that I was like, oh, I don't feel like I'm going to die anymore. I'm like, I could totally do this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if I feel weird and awkward, like, okay. Like, look,
Mm-hmm.
like I could show up and be awkward. Like, that's a
Okay.
thing. Like, that's a thing and it doesn't matter. Like, that's just fucking blowing my mind.
Yes. And it really helps when you're practicing that with people that love and care about you, because what I found is, well, it's the perfectionist thinking too. And I think that's just like a protector voice that's like, well, you have to show up just this way so that no one knows that you're uncomfortable or you're
Yeah.
awkward or, and what I kept on finding out is that I can show up in a way that, well, this is depression voice talking, but let's be real. There's been times where I make plans to go do something and then I don't want to subject myself to somebody. Where I'm just like, I don't want to put them through the experience of having to deal with me right now because I'm tired and I know all the things that are going on in here. But the people that love and care about you don't have to deal with you 24/7. That's your job.
Right.
Thank God. And
Right.
also, sorry about it. Then I show up and I'm feeling not my best self. I'm feeling awkward and sad, like, and bless people that love and care. How are you doing? And I just like deer in the headlights being like, I showed up. Weird smile I can't control. And that I've gotten multiple I've been lucky to get multiple times of feedback unprompted where then that person I hung out with when I was really not feeling my best and was like worried about how I was going to be and like, I guess, ruining their time or something like that. They would like reach out to me the day after being like, it was so good seeing you. Like, your laugh's infectious. Like, your energy's great. And I'm just like,
What?
oh,
They're not
right.
inside the rest of this.
Like, people can love and care about you and know you're going through a hard time and still be so glad you showed up because they're not worried about getting your sad on them or whatever.
Getting your sad on them. Wow.
And so that's been a really lovely thing I've been doing for myself, but also practicing with other people, which is why I think that whole just like healing and community aspect has been something I've been thinking about so much because
Mhm.
my instinct is to isolate and then come out in my perfect form as a, let's be real, robot. I think that's the goal, is like
Oh.
a bee boop, you can't touch me. I say the right thing. My voice never cracks. My eye does not
Mm.
twitch when I'm asked how I am.
Your armpits never sweat, and your face and your chest certainly never flush.
And it's so funny because if I met someone like that, I would not want to be hanging out with that person. That's
The
uncanny valley.
robot.
Like, yeah, I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to hang out with a unfeeling, always says the right thing
Yeah.
robot human. That's the paradox.
Yeah. That was really just making me think of an Andrea Gibson
Mm,
line that was in one of their emails. It was do you get their newsletter?
I do.
It was the email about the bucket list, but it was called like a different kind of bucket list.
Mm-hmm.
And the line was about something about like being nervous and like sweating through my shirt and loving myself more for it.
Yeah.
And I've like really been hanging on to that.
Mm-hmm. Andrea is very good
Ugh.
for self-compassion affirmations like that.
Yeah, that one, it just
Mm-hmm.
feels so like if I know that they're showing up in their life thinking that thought of like, oh, I can go into something feeling totally like nervous and awkward, and so much so that I sweat through my whole shirt and then love myself more for it
Mm-hmm.
instead of, what I've been trying to do, right? Very much like your robot self of like feeling then worse about myself.
Mm-hmm.
I it just feels like revolutionary to be like, okay, I'm nervous and I'm sweating and I love myself for it. Like I'm human and I'm showing up anyway and I'm doing the thing anyway. Like
Yeah.
these were fireworks, by the way. I was doing
Oh,
fireworks.
yeah, of course. I know.
Duh.
I was just cycling through examples in my head, where like even just the other night, there's someone that I run into like on a consistent basis out and about, but we've never hung out one-on-one. And their level of confidence is always so astounding to me. Like, when you maybe, oh, okay, it's this. I was trying to figure out how to describe it. It's a level of confidence that makes you feel taken care of. Like, this person is so self assured and grounded that I feel safe in their presence
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
they're just so there and they got it.
Yes.
And then we were talking at the party and they were actively talking about how nervous and awkward and they didn't know what to do with their hands, and they like found themselves not talking to anybody by themselves, and they kind of like saddled up to like me and a couple of people that were like in like a little horseshoe just chatting, and they're like, can I be here?
Oh my God.
I don't know what to do. And then like just were charming and delightful
Mm.
and admitting that they were nervous, and then made a joke about how that's never them, not them, as they're doing like little kicks to get the energy out. I'm just like, that's the kind of humans I want to be hanging out with.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we could just all be our weird selves and talk about how awkward we are
And
while
that's okay.
using our bodies to like process it real time.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that
And the
makes
whole
me
circle of people were just nodding, being like,
yeah, everybody was
yep,
like, yeah, of course.
same.
I love that so
It's really
much.
lovely.
That makes me think of that conversation that my therapist had with me that I
Hmm.
know that I've talked to you about. I don't know if we talked about it on here, but when she was talking about like people with like what she was calling, I think, like safe nervous systems to like be around, or like
Right.
maybe like regulated nervous
Yeah.
systems to be around, which I think then this also goes back to that reel that I texted you about, or Marco pulled you about the other day,
Hmm.
that like the opposite of dysregulated or like unregulated is not, or like the goal of like
Right.
regulating your nervous system is not to have like a perfectly like perfectly how am I saying this?
It is I the assertion that the goal is not to be perfectly regulated all the time, because that's not how nervous systems and life works.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is to, when dysregulated, be able to come back into regulation in a healthy and like timely manner. And so you can withstand that dysregulation, because that, I mean, that literally keeps us alive. You get dysregulated when something scary happens or when there's stressors, like
Right.
your nervous
Like it's
system's
supposed to
acting
like,
correctly.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so the
And
goal
just
isn't to, right, just be in like a flat level state all the time. It's to be able
mhm,
to express yourself and lay your boundaries and feel the feelings that are coming
mhm,
up when you get dysregulated. Yeah. So that made me think of that like conversation of like the people that you meet, that you're around, that feel like they're like a really like safe space to be around. And that like, you know, you look at that person, you're like, look at this like confident, self-assured person, like this is great to be around them. And they show up and they're like, I'm feeling all awkward and stuff, like and, but it's just like, and that's okay, and we're gonna
right.
like move through it together, and like,
It made me trust them more.
yeah,
I was already feeling like, oh, this person I like being around, because it felt grounding and safe. And then they were very honest and genuine. And then I was just like, oh, you're a real human that I can trust,
yeah.
because you are able to be present with yourself. And that just felt very aligned with everything I'm trying to learn how to do for myself.
Yeah, does that like, does it feel like it's a big relief? Like to me, I feel like that would feel like a big relief to me, to be like, I don't have to have it always figured out. I don't have to always just feel fine. I don't have
Mm-hmm.
to always be okay. Like I'm going to experience all of the things, and that's okay.
Right.
And I'm going to, right, I'm going to feel awkward, and I'm going to show up anyway, and I'm good, like, and that's okay. It
Yes.
feels kind of like a relief, like, oh, I don't have to be fucking perfect. I don't have to be a
Mm-hmm.
little robot.
Yeah, it's so interesting that I can hold that all day long for other people. And I don't know, well, I do know. I have some culprits of how I got this way. But it's fascinating to me that I'm perfectly capable and find it so easy to hold that for somebody else. And then when it comes to me, I have the hardest time. And even just like, what was it, a month ago now, I had a really weird experience where, even though I've been doing all of this work, in a high stress situation, I found myself reverting back to all of these things that felt like they were coming from another person. So I was at a venue doing a job, and I was alone in the room with like the person I was like partnered with doing the same job. And I got a distressing text and was having a lot of worry and grief about it. And I was trying to do the task, but my brain couldn't do it because I was having emotions. But I had bottled them up immediately. Like it was like just automatic, like I can't let anybody know that I'm going through this huge thing. And then my brain was just like, that's funny because you can't. That's not how this is going to work. So I'm like sitting there doing the task with tears streaming off my face, like just uncontrolled. And this person like noticed. And then I was just like, I'm so sorry. I did this twice and I'm having a hard time. And I could like hear me like trying to keep an even tone. And I was just like, why can't you just tell this other human you got an upsetting text and you're worried about your family member?
Mm-hmm.
That's so human. Of
Mm-hmm.
course you're not having a good time. Of course you can't focus on this task. You got an upsetting text and you don't have all the data yet, and it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like finding myself throughout the night then because like I had things to do. And like and it was even funnier because like everyone was like, what else do you have to do? Like, I got it. Like, you can go home. But I also didn't want to be alone. So I was like, well, I'd rather just be here. But thanks. But I like with each interaction was finding myself like apologizing and feeling awkward, like, and bad for admitting that I was having a hard time and why. When it was like the most human of all human experiences, no one could ever fault another human for having the reaction that I was having. And in hindsight, I just was mystified by how sure I was of like, no, we got to stuff this down. We got to pretend like everything's okay. What?
Yeah, I will say though that unfortunately there are shitty people out there who would say bad, nasty, not understanding things. Because
Well, yeah, that's how I think I got that in my
yeah,
head. That's not
yeah,
my voice. I didn't come
right,
up with that on my own.
right.
And I think what was mystifying to me is, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But like and granted, there were people I didn't know around, but I was in a space that has only ever been supportive with people that are attracted to that space because they're full humans with, and I mean, and that's exactly what happened. Like the person I was with in the room, um, I hadn't met her before that night.
Hmm.
And her immediate response was, I got this. You're fine. Like, this is fine. Don't worry about it. I got you. Do you need a hug? And I was just like, oh, yeah, I think I do. Thanks. It was just like oh, of course. You're a human. I'm a human. This is fine. Like, let's all just do what we need to do to take care of ourselves. And I'm just like, knew that, but it like flew out the window immediately in like a high stress situation. And then I fell back on all that conditioning of you don't get to be a whole human with your experience. You have to be you have to protect that productivity, whether that was school or work or just being a human in society.
Did you find that like throughout the night or like afterwards you were able to give yourself some grace and compassion back? Or did you just feel like
Yeah, I did because people showed it to me. Oh, yeah, I'm already getting teary-eyed. Because I was feeling really embarrassed and like, well, I don't want this to be happening. But then people were being so genuinely there for me, and just in a, of course, this is what we're doing. Like it didn't feel like, I didn't feel like they were doing it out of any kind of like obligation. It was like they genuinely cared that another human was having a hard time. Um, and I think it was like a moment of like, oh, I'm feeling embarrassed about this thing, but these people are being so genuine and present with me. And that idea that you were just talking about, that like people with safe nervous systems being around them, is like that co-regulation
Yeah.
of, oh, I get to kind of borrow their groundedness and like feel my feelings, but in a way that feels bearable and supported.
Oh, I just got chills. What if like you were meant to get that text while you were there, so you had that support and groundedness?
Oh, that's a really lovely way to think about it. Because you know what I did is, what I ended up doing is, which is so messed up, there was a voice in my head that said, well, you should have just never been checking your phone when you knew you had a job to do. Isn't that interesting? Oh no,
But
that
what if
conditioning's
it,
so deep.
yeah, but what if instead it was that like you were meant to
Well, that's
receive
what I'm
that
saying. Thank
message? Yeah.
goodness I looked at
Yeah.
that text message when I did. Because if I had waited until I was like on my way home, then I just
And
would have
all
been
by yourself.
home
Yeah.
alone with that worry and strife, with no one to talk to about it because it was late at night. And I'm someone that would be, well, I can't call anybody, it's too late. And and then I just would have had to be in it. But because I did check my phone, I was around multiple people that were able to be there for me, whether they knew me for a while or not, which was really nice.
Magic.
The universe is neat.
It is something, that's for sure. It is indeed something. What else you got bouncing around in there?
I just started thinking about the universe and like time travel healing, and this idea that, oh, there's this really beautiful illustration an artist did that I found back in like, I think 2019, pretty sure. And it has text, and it just says, what if everything turns out okay? And I think that that is what I keep on learning over and over with the universe, where I tend to go to worst case scenario and do a lot of the, well, what if this horrible thing happened? Or what if I can't handle the thing? And it's a hard practice, but something I've been actively doing is, well, what if I can handle it? Like, we could thought experiment both ways. And if I'm going to feed a lot of energy into the, shadowy uncertainty, well, why don't I look at the bright, sparkly uncertainty?
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes things do work out in the way that they're supposed to, even when it doesn't seem ideal. And I feel like that example of, oh, in the multiverse of how that could have played out, of just checking this text message, I was feeling bad about how it happened because it was uncomfortable, and I was feeling guilty for subjecting myself. Here it is. All right, patterns. Subjecting myself to other people because I was having a big feeling and a hard time on this like show night. And I was just like, oh, okay. As you said, that was the best way that could have played out, because it allowed me to build trust with people. It was a trust building thing with like multiple folks. I got the support I needed. I didn't have to do the things alone, which has been a big,
Mm-hmm.
lifelong, like, fear that I'm
Mm-hmm.
just always going to have to do things alone and how devastating that feels. And that was like a really good um pushback on that narrative. That's very sticky and so
Mm-hmm.
insistent.
It is. That is also definitely one of mine. And the yeah, let's hash out all the worst case scenarios and just dive deep down into
Mhm.
this anxiety and depression over it, which I think is exactly what I was talking about going to that party and like walking myself through that. But yeah, I noticed that I do that a lot. It's kind of like my first thing is to catastrophize.
Mhm.
And I have also too been I it's kind of like I'm butting up against it of like I see what you're doing there. Whatever part of my brain is whatever part of whatever is in there doing that. I see what you're doing, mm, but like that's not what's happening right now.
Mhm.
And so can you let it go? Like or right, can you if you can catastrophize this, can you also then dream about like the best case scenario instead of
Yeah.
like the worst case? What a fucking practice.
Yeah, it actually reminds me of the thing that you were talking about with the daydreaming, like allowing yourself.
Mm,
It's
yes.
very related to that of like
Yes.
not limiting yourself by allowing your precious, precious energy to be feeding into something that, and that's what the is really a kick in the teeth is that most of the time those things don't even happen.
Right, right. I just told myself that the other day when I was like
Mm-hmm.
going down a thing, and I was like, it doesn't have. Maybe this thing has happened once.
Mm-hmm.
Like I I just it's like can I give you a quick example?
Of course.
Okay, so like recycling night is every other week
Mm-hmm.
here on you got to put the recycling out Tuesday night and it gets picked up Wednesday morning. And that's one of like Luke's chores is to take the bins out to the curb, and he often forgets, and so I often have to remind him. And we've been trying to work on like what's a good reminder system, or that's going to
Yeah.
work for him. And it just happened again the other week. Like I get up first Wednesday morning, and I look out and the bins aren't there. And I'm like, oh my God, like you better get those fucking bins out there before they come, right? Because like our
Mm-hmm.
bins are like overflowing. And if we have to wait
Yeah.
another 2 weeks, like I just don't want to deal with this. And then I found myself just spiraling out of all these like you got to get out there like right now and get that out there. And I'm like thinking about, okay, and then if he doesn't get them out there, and then what I'm going to have to do to mitigate all these extra
Mm.
recycling things, and we're going to have to make a trip to the center to drop them off, and just like, and then I was like, time out, Bridget. Is any of this happening right now?
Mm-hmm.
No. I was like, did the recycling people come yet? I like peek out. Nope, there's still bins out there.
And you're
Okay, fine.
actively mad about having to go to the center.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I've
I'm
been like
like,
this.
yeah, and then I'm like getting upset that like he didn't take it out already, because like sometimes they come really early and sometimes they come later on, so you never really
Oh,
know exactly like when they're going to show up. So I'm getting
yeah.
upset that he didn't have the bins out early enough in case the truck comes early. But the truth of the situation was that the truck didn't come yet, and he got up, got ready for work, took the bins out, everything was fine.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck, Bridget?
But you have to
Like,
go through that
cut it.
whole roller
Yeah, I
coaster
was, and
of,
more, and more. And I
uh-huh.
was like, fucking cut it off. You know how much energy this is taking for problems that don't fucking exist. And I just start noticing the more and more and more and more I do that.
Mm-hmm.
Ah,
I mean, it makes sense because what your brain's trying to do is protect you by going through all the scenarios. It's not efficient and it doesn't work, but it it is trying to help. And sometimes that's my way through where I'm like, oh, you are trying to help, but you're just making a really big mess. Let me tell you how that is the case. And let's try a different way,
Yes.
maybe.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hard.
It is hard. And I think that that's where the is it the IFS, internal family
Mm-hmm.
system, the parts work
Yep.
that you introduced me to, that I still really like don't know much about, but that's what this has been really helpful for me in breaking things like this down, of that
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to now be like, okay, what's the like the part of me that is absolutely freaking out about having to solve all of these problems.
Yeah,
And
because our
then
concern is real.
yeah, and then I can be like, okay, I can give like love and compassion to this part of me that is really just trying to protect me or take care of me, or like whatever the
Yeah.
thing is. And then I'm like, okay, I love you, and girl, we are not continuing this. This is
Mm-hmm.
not how we're going to keep operating. Like, I see you've done a great job at doing this in the past. Fantastic, but we're not moving forward this way.
It's not sustainable.
No, I just want to let that shit go. And I do find that, like, as I am noticing these things and letting them
Mm-hmm.
go, that it does feel like I have more space.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
It's not as dense. It's not as heavy. You're not as exhausted.
I feel more free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really perfect word for it. I've been thinking about freedom so much.
It
What
feels
it
like
means, how to
lighter.
get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Ugh. You know what I was just thinking? Completely unrelated. Good cake. Um, your background right now, all I can see is you and like the wall behind you, nothing on it. And then I'm like looking at my wall, and it was kind of like similar. And then there's like a little bit of a plant. But then I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking like, oh my God, what if our like walls were just like completely the same? But then we like did a thing where, like it like started on like one of our things, and then like you had a thing over there, and it like looked like it was like the same.
Okay, let's do it. What's that plant behind you?
So we got a spider plant up top there hanging.
Yeah, you gave me a cutting from that. I'll think about how I can mount it because right now all my plans have to be in a very specific place because this monster
Yes, that is
cat.
exactly why all of mine are hanging up. But when is my video flipped? Like I guess it would depend on which way our videos are lining up on the screen as well.
Oh, yeah,
Because
there's
when
that.
I am looking at this, I'm on the left and you're on the right.
Okay.
So when I go like this, I'm like touching the middle of our screens.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the case for you?
This is my left arm.
This is my left arm. Okay. And with that,
Good cake.
good cake. And does the podcast know about good cake?
I don't know.
Well, real quick, good cake is what I have adopted as my beautiful ADHD. I'm gonna change subjects because it was used in my partner's family at like a big family dinner, who knows how long ago. People are having conversations, and then one person just loudly in the middle of the conversation, they're eating cake or whatever it is, they just say like good cake really loud, and it just like completely like changes the subject, cuts everything off. So that's like a joke now in his family, that they'll just like say good cake if they're changing the subject. And for my ADHD ass, I was like, that is the most goddamn brilliant thing ever, because now I know that I can completely change directions and go somewhere else, and I can just say good cake, and then it's not going to like derail him, or
Mm-hmm.
because he's going to be like, oh, she's changing subjects, but I don't have to like explain myself. It's just say good cake and then change the subject. It's great.
Yeah, it is a very useful tool.
I
And
love
I
it.
think that I should start explaining it to more people in my life so I can use it as a shorthand, because I use it with you and it feels very supportive. And luckily, I know a lot of neurodivergent people, so it would make a lot of sense to them. But even amongst neurodivergents, there's always a, a moment where your neurodivergence is on one track and then someone else pops in with their good cake, but they don't inform you.
Mhm.
And then like it does feel like a derail where you're just
Yeah.
like, I'm so sorry, I have to recalibrate. What is happening?
Mhm.
But the good cake is just like such a lovely little sign in my brain.
Mhm.
As soon as I hear it, I'm just like
Oh, we're
recalibrated
on. Yep.
immediately.
Yep. We're on the
No
next track.
brain space wasted
Yeah. Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
figure out what's happening, because I know.
It's good. I also like love it because it also interjects a little visual of a cake for me in my mind, right? So then I'm thinking like, oh, this little tiny good cake, which is kind of like it's like the paragraph symbol, or it's like the next chapter, like whatever it is, but it's a little cake.
It's so interesting. I keep on forgetting that other people don't have visuals. And you just reminded me that, did you know that there are people that don't
I
visualize
think,
things?
yeah, we watched that reel by ADHD Love. Is that their handle?
Yes, I
Yeah.
think so. And then there's
Let's,
also like
yeah.
a Facebook graph that's going around talking about
Oh.
visualization as well. And it's interesting to hear that yours is a little cake, because I didn't even think to tell you this, but one of the other reasons I really like the good cake thing is because it makes me think of a large, very decadent chocolate cake. And so
Oh.
I have that sensory experience of like having like a deep, rich cocoa, like, um, yeah, no, it's chocolate on chocolate on chocolate,
Like
because
a
it has
German
like
chocolate cake? No.
close. Yeah, close, but a little bit more rich and a little heavier on the cocoa, because it's like
Chocolate
a
ganache.
dark, yeah. And it has like a layer in between the cake, and it's like surrounded, but it's not too sweet because I don't like that. But it's like
This
there's
is,
definitely dark chocolate in there. So every time I hear good cake, that is what I'm
wow.
visualizing, and sometimes I even smell it.
This is nuts because that is my cake nightmare. So the cake that I see, I would never see that cake. Never. I'm seeing maybe like, honestly, if I'm being honest, maybe it's like a cake emoji. Like either like the tiny round cake with the candles on it, but
Oh
it's
yeah,
it's
that's
like
sweet.
white frosted, or the cake slice that I believe is also like it's like a white frosted little triangle cake with a
Mm-hmm.
strawberry on top.
Yep.
Mm, yes.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a
Very.
little vanilla cake, like a
Yeah.
little.
Not me. A big, like too big. Like if someone handed me to it, I'm like, who's gonna eat all that? You're like sharing it 4 people. But that's what happens in my brain every time.
Oh God, I love your brain. I love getting to know your brain. Oh, how delightful.
And I like that it's like a similar thing that you and I have going on, but manifesting in very different ways.
Yeah. 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 Wow. Oh, I love it. I love
Most excellent cake.
it. Most excellent cake.